Will the surging dollar crash the global economy? Let me get this straight. We printed $7 trillion, inflation goes up to 10%, and the dollar index goes up? What in the world is going on? Sit tight, I'm going to explain it all right now. Foreign exchange markets are zero-sum relative markets. What that means is that you're always trading one currency relative to another. So it's always yen versus dollars or dollars versus euros, so on and so forth. But the dollar plays a uniquely special role in this system because it's the reserve currency for the global economy. As we talked about in the earlier video, the dollar is the reserve currency primarily because it's just the largest economy in the world. And so by virtue of sheer size, foreign countries end up with a lot of dollar reserves due to trade and sheer demand for dollars because there's so much goods and services backing those dollars. This adoption of the dollar as the domestic currency is not only the result of foreign trade, but it can also be a choice of domestic entities who just prefer to be paid in dollars. But this is problematic because when a country starts to rely too heavily on a foreign currency, they also inherently adopt the monetary policies of that country and become reliant on the kindness of strangers. So the dollar is going up against everything else, in large part because it's the best house in a really bad neighborhood of fiat currencies. But is that necessarily good? Well, look at the history of the dollar index going back to the early 1990s, and you can notice that every time the dollar spikes, it tends to portend something not so great going on. There's a great new paper out called The Global Dollar Cycle. I linked to it below, and it explains why the rising dollar may not be such a great thing, in essence because it's consistent with falling global risk appetites, tightening global financial conditions, and tightening U.S. monetary policy. The authors state that since the middle of 2021, the dollar has surged, and as a result of this, a global contraction has coincided with it. This is clearly true from looking at something like global PMIs. Monetary policy is especially important here because as the Fed tightens the US economy, they also implicitly tighten a lot of the global economy. And this is especially important for countries that have borrowed in US dollars because now it becomes even more difficult for them to obtain those dollars, which forces them in all likelihood to have to either tax into a slowdown or borrow more at more expensive rates. This is one aspect of monetary policy that a lot of people don't think about, is that when the Fed tightens domestic monetary policy, they also implicitly tighten a lot of foreign monetary policy by virtue of the dollar simply being the currency that those countries also rely on heavily. The bottom line is that the Fed's in a terrible bind here because they want to bring inflation down quickly, but it's looking increasingly like the only way to bring inflation down as fast as they can is to be incredibly restrictive with the global reserve currency's monetary policy. So yes, the longer the Fed stays restrictive, the higher the probability of a global recession is. Dang, over 3.5 minutes? Who titled this series? Guys, thanks for watching. If you like the videos, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment for me.